Welcome to Evening of Empowerment, the podcast for out-of-school time professionals, educators, and leaders who are passionate about growth, impact, and innovation in education. I'm your host, Richmond Brown, and the founder of Enrich by Richmond, where we're dedicated to inspiring leaders, elevating program quality, and creating enriching experiences for students and staff. Awesome. Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing? Good. Y'all talk to me. How y'all doing?
Yeah, all right.
I know everyone's been, traveling, and I also just want to take a moment to thank you all for being here. My name is Richmond Brown, and I have the honor to have Dr. Terry Peterson with me here. My podcast is called Evenings of Empowerment. It actually came from a space of wanting to provide professional development for after-school professionals, for those who I wasn't able to, access directly, but still wanted to be able to reach. And so within this space, I truly want to ensure that we are empowering each other, because we know in after-school spaces we operate in these silos where, again, all the different things that are happening in our spaces are just in our spaces. And I think it's so important for us as professionals to come together and connect, and not just within those connections, but also collaborate together. So Evenings of Empowerment is here today to really highlight the importance of connection, which is our focus. And so today, again, if you all could welcome Dr. Terry Peterson here with me as my first ever guest for Evenings of Empowerment. So, Dr. Peterson, thank you so much for, again, joining me on this. And today, again, we got the opportunity to connect and have coffee. We all know connection between coffee is always great, but we were able to really just kind of discuss the root of where we met. So just a little background: about 4 or 5 years ago now, I got the opportunity to work in an organization that Terry's wife founded. And prior to that, 10 years ago, I got the opportunity to work with him with the Afterschool Summer Camp Resource Center think tank. And just thinking about the importance of that connection over the last 10 years and how it's truly developed, and also just learning from an individual who's contributed so much in this work. As you see this amazing shirt, he is the Godfather of Afterschool. And so within that, could you just share, again, when you think of connection, what's the first things that come to you and all of that?
Okay, let me just briefly mention that I had the great opportunity to help create the 21st Century Community Learning Center nationwide. And I now work with all 50 states trying to get more state funding and support for after-school, summer learning, and childcare. And what I've learned is connection, connections. You have to connect with people who make decisions, and you may not know that the person you're talking to 10 years from now might be making a decision. So you can't just focus on people who have influence and power in your community and state, but you should. But you also should get yourself involved in community groups and organizations, even if you're not particularly good in that area, but you think it's going to be full of people who make decisions. And you should get there early to the meeting, and you should stay late. And you should meet every one of them, shake their hands, look them in the eye. You don't even have to even ask them for anything, but just make those connections. I've found that is, particularly in our field, is so important, because I think so many people working after school and summers, you're doing such important work and it's exhausting. You assume that everybody outside, school boards, mayors, nonprofits, foundations, know what you're doing and want to fund you. They might want to fund you, but they don't know it yet until you make the connection with them. And it's not something you just jump into and go to one meeting and make a request and expect to get funding. Highly unlikely. You have to make connections. You have to explain what you're doing, describe what you're doing. After you get to know somebody well, invite them to your program sites. It's just amazing that this field has been around a long time, but not as long as most other things. Most folks who make decisions, school board members, legislators, governors, Congress people, they have no clue really what you do. And the only way they know is by you connecting with them and then connecting them live with what you're doing.
Thank you for that. When we were talking about connections and those levels, we got the opportunity to talk. How would you set or share with someone who's new and sharing about like their stories in the after schooling and also making those connections?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll describe first what I see happens. Often, many of the people in our field are youngish, either in the field or in age. They might go to a reception in the community, and I often find them in a corner all by themselves. So the people, the bankers, the doctors are over here laughing it up, and they feel like they don't have anything often to offer. And my experience is most of those people, not all, most want to know what you do, but you have to approach them first and just go up and say, hey, I'm Richmond. I have the most interesting job. I work with these 10 kids, and you know, some of them are struggling, but I got them into this, and not a long speech. I tend to give long speeches, but don't do that. Just short, and half the time they'll say, tell me more. That's the way you get them involved, and at some point, maybe a little while later, a couple days, couple weeks, couple months, kind of keep up with them somehow without stretching the relationship. And then you say, God, I wish I had 10 volunteers from that business, or maybe they could sponsor a luncheon for parents or whatever. Then you can ask them for that. You have sort of a natural advantage in after school and summers, I think, because it's not so structured. A lot of people, business people, senior citizens, want to get involved as mentors or volunteers in schools. They see it as way too structured, way too big. So you have to kind of know that going in, that you have a natural advantage. You might not think you have an advantage, but you kind of have a natural advantage because your space is more fluid, I hope, and more interesting, I hope, than most school days. And the staff you have and partnerships, I hope, are a little more interesting. I'm totally involved in regular daytime education, but it lacks in sort of innovation and interest. You have that, and so groups, people, volunteers, senior citizens, if you explain what you're doing, they might help do something that you need done.
All right. Thinking about just, you brought into like the school day. A little background about myself, I had the opportunity to oversee program quality for the school day and the after school. Thinking about connections in that space, what do you think is the most important connection in that alignment from the school day to after school for students and also just the staff?
Yeah, and that's where I spent most of my time over my life, is trying to reform and transform the school day, and with great success, to be modest. But there's sort of it's like when you get into the school space, it's like gravity. The tendency is to do what you did 10 years ago, 8 to 3, only certified teachers, 50-minute classroom, heavy on content, and kids are there, but they have to be there.
Right.
After school and summer is voluntary. So right away, it has to be interesting, engaging, and by the way, I think the first dynamic or factor kids look for is connections.
Yes.
If they walk on the after school or summer property and don't feel like they belong or connected, they aren't coming back.
Exactly.
Now, once you have them there, the activities have to be interesting and connecting. So, given all that, you have to kind of think of the normal gravity in the school day,
Right.
and you have to think of your flexibility and ability to use different kinds of people. So often, I think there will be some people in your school or district who really see you as an asset. Others just don't get it. There may be some teachers who love, who knows, art projects, walking, jogging, welding, who knows what, and feel constrained during the school day. And if you can find some of those and involve them in your after school and summer program, but don't ask them to do what they did during the school day. That's what we tend to do. The superintendent or principal said, oh, this teacher is fabulous in reading. I want you to have use her to teach reading 2 more hours after school in summers. Yikes. That burns out the teacher.
Yes.
And but maybe that reading teacher loves robotics or tennis or golf. And no one has said to the teacher, how about you teach, use your interest area, and embed some reading and speaking and math, but start with the interest area. So I try to break into the school that way. Often maybe assistant principals could be in that same ilk, that'd be helpful. The high schools, I learned from a program out here in California, they work a lot in high school, they say, you gotta break in through the coaches. Most high schools, the coaches have much more longevity than the principal. And they might see you as a competitor. They need kids for their teams. If you can approach them and find areas they need help with and interested in, they can be great allies.
Nice. You saying that, it brings back, I got an opportunity to speak at a previous conference, and the panelists I got to sit on it reminded me again, connection before content. And relationship before strategy. And so just thinking about, again, like you sharing with the way to get to some of the students is through the coaches, because of, again, that connection, that relationship. And then again, like you shared, that space of belonging. And so we spoke earlier, I wanted you to kind of share like the 3 levels of connections that you shared with me about after school, because I think in the space that we're in, we serve students, but we also forget that we also serve the adults that serve the students. And I think it's so important for us to, stay centered in that, and creating that space for adults and letting them know how that feels is so important, because they're then able to model that for the students. So just going through those 3 levels, if you want to share.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned a little bit, so the starting point is connection with the young people. They have to feel connected. They have to feel a positive relationship with the staff. So if you're a supervisor, a site supervisor, or multiple sites, helping staff understand you really have to reach out to the young people right away, make it interesting, fun. Ridgeway involved in a program in a really rural area of South Carolina, where every kid hated STEM, STEAM, anything you can think about, very high poverty. You get off the bus and you're met by balloons. And music. The music is designed by high school. A group of high school students designed the music for the middle school and elementary kids. They get off the bus to music, they get sent off with music. And one of the programs, the first day, the kids showed up very different than the traditional summer reading and math program. Little girl shows up, first one off the bus, sort of the leader of the group, and she heard the music and saw the chalk on the sidewalk, welcomed, and she put up her hands to the rest of the kids on the bus and said, I think we're at the wrong place. And it makes a difference. It sounds hokey, but you're sending a message like, we want to meet you. Now, then the content has to connect. It has to be interesting. So the first level, the challenge is for managers of any level is just doing that, the connection to the students and families and kids when they enter and continue, is very hard and draining. But if you want to get financial support, partnership support, then you have to go to the next level connection. And that is finding people around your site, organizations, volunteers, businesses, employers, and it could be all kinds of, it could be retirees.
The grocery store.
Yeah.
Dealerships.
The
gas
if
station.
you're in a rural area, farmers. The farm today, a lot of farm people are operating $1 million equipment. There's other backbreeding farm work, but there's other that people need to know about. Think of those possible connections, and then kind of getting out in the community and going to clubs. I don't know what clubs are in your area, Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce. You might even have to get somebody to sponsor you, and half the content is, you'll wish you weren't there. But, showing up is a big deal in making connections outside your realm. People see you, and then you meet them. You see them on the street, you see them at some other, and go up and talk to them. Don't be shy. I mean, and say, hey, I saw you at X or why, and you don't have to give them a lecture then yet. Make that a little later before you tell them in depth what you do and ask them for something. Or they may offer. A lot of people, once they hear or see that you're sincere and really doing it, they'll say, you know, I got this something, can I help? And if you don't see how it fits right away, don't say no, just say, gosh, that's wonderful. You know, let us take it back and I'll think about it, and then think about if it fits to do that. So that's sort of right around your, you know, within a mile, 2-3 miles of your site.
Yeah.
And then, you know, but the big bucks, the big bucks is gonna be in the school district, it's gonna be in city council, county councils, foundations, state legislatures, and Congress.
Yeah.
They got the big bucks, and eventually, to have sustained funding, you've got to get your foothold. And here in California, if those in California have done a masterful job over 25 years of getting state appropriations and started small, now it's like, what, 4 or 5 billion when you add it up. Nobody's like that in the country. But it started, I had the rare privilege, I was the chief counselor for the U.S. Secretary of Education when the 21st Century program started. I got my lessons here in California from programs that were starting up in San Diego, LA, Fresno, Sacramento, San Francisco. And those local programs cited like, hey, we're doing a good job, but we got to get state money. And then they, you know, worked through it and had, fortunately, 2 different governors, different parties supported that, and that's fabulous. Other states are just starting to do that, but it starts with a few people who, and then networking, connecting to a few people in other parts of your region or state who say that, you know, we need to get state support, or we need to get Congress to support, and then maybe create a committee of some sort where you have several in California working in this at all times, informing members of the legislature and the governor, and it's endless because you know, there's constant demand for the funding, and they don't know what you know about the success, and you have to keep sharing those successes. Not just in an end-of-year report, but every week, if you can, doing something.
Yeah, you sharing that, it's bringing a lot, just like, again, not just sharing end-of-year report, like how many, we all have impact reports that we share out, but honestly, thinking about your impact report is really what you share out to your community on a regular. I remember first being a site coordinator many years ago and like wanting more items, but again, in South Carolina, the funding's a little bit different. So having to reach out, and I remember going to also a training where they talked about, again, collaborative communities thriving together. And you're saying something as far as like, we as people, if we sit closer together, we can thrive more. And again, reaching out into our community and being able to tell those stories so people could understand exactly what we do. Because I do, regardless of how long we've been doing work, I always think there's still that misconception of out of school time learning, expanded learning, and after schooling. So just within your connections, thinking about just what I shared there, with your connections within 21st Century, how have you been able to advocate just nationwide on the work to continue to get buy-in from people? Definitely, and then also thinking for emerging leaders who are just getting started and having to learn to say like, hi, my name is Richmond, I do this work, and I want you to be interested. Yeah.
Well, so much of education decided at the state level. And so having a statewide coalition or network, and you have one here, the California Afterschool Network. Every state now has a state after-school network or coalitions. I, with some other people, work with all 50 of those. And they're at different stages because, you know, their legislature or governor might be somewhat interested, might hate it, they want to cut it, some want to increase it, but you constantly have to find, this maybe is another level of connection, is that in this work at the local level, let's say school board or city council or state, there's bound to be some people just outside your orbit who like what you're doing but don't know quite what you're doing. You need to find some of those people and help, encourage them to help you reach those decision makers. You can also, you know, by showing up on days on the Hill, emails, texts. Site visits are critical, but you often need a couple champions who aren't in your space. Perfect example, Alabama, rather conservative, okay? The lieutenant governor there, very conservative guy. Their after-school network, one of the, you love this, living next to your neighbor, Tia, one of the persons who leads the state after-school network in Alabama is a neighbor of the lieutenant governor. And in Alabama, the lieutenant governor has a lot of influence. They had a meeting of their after-school advisory committee for the state, like 60, 70 people, and they decided at that time, almost no money, state money. And this advisory group said, maybe we need a task force, official task force at the state level to identify the need. Both double need there. Alabama has a very low rate of workforce participation and a lot of jobs. Right. One hand. Other hand, you got to get the new workforce, kids who are interested, engaged. And they went to Lieutenant Governor after this advisory committee and said, would you create this task force? I happened to be there talking to this group. They dragged me along. And I worked a lot in the South, so it's just a different world, just like California can be. So I didn't say much. The two women leaders of the group knew him and laid it on in a very quick way. And he said, yeah, let's do it, like in 5 minutes. Wow. And just yesterday it passed. Once it got in motion, it took a year almost. But that 5 minutes by those two people, he's a totally unlikely person to be interested in this, but they knew the word or two. So that's why I'm saying sometimes you got to maintain these relationships, and you have to find a few people out of your orbit. That's sort of another connection level.
I love that. I think for me, my last question was, again, who is one person who you've connected with or, again, have been in that orbit that surprised you within that connection that they were able to be someone to support?
I don't know why my kids and grandkids are embarrassed by me because any place we go, I talk with someone. Mm-hmm. Like tonight, I'm getting a little older. I've known to have a martini or two late at night, and that's a good time. Not that you have to have martinis, but you can make connections. Unlikely. I'll give you 3 examples. One, young guy, long time ago, dark shades, hair down to here, big mustache out to here, not kind of an establishment state bureaucrat. Okay. I got put on a state committee because I'm good with numbers on school funding, of which I knew nothing, but I'm good with numbers. So I went to all the meetings early, left late. I don't know if I said anything in the whole, year. Wow. Not even knowing that in the committee was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee for the state, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and the chairman of another committee. Mm-hmm. And, they sort of liked me. And we had a new governor elected. He needed an education advisor, and somebody suggested I get the job, and I had no clue what the job was, and I got it. And I found out later it had almost nothing to do with me. He asked those 3 people, have you ever worked with this guy? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a nice guy.
They were able to
speak on that. That's yeah. And another one is the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. 25 years ago had 7 sites in the nation. Today it's 11,000. There was a meeting in Washington, D.C. It happened to be in a heavy place, like the White House. But a foundation came up to me, the Mott Foundation chairman, and it said, I think I heard you're working on this. We want to be supportive. Randomly. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, we have grantees all over the country that we could help you roll out a new federal program. And he said, how much money do you need? I had never even thought about it. And I said, $5 million. That was just for the technical assistance. He said, okay. And I have worked with that foundation since 25 years. Then I was in the federal government, but now I work for them as a consultant. But not that that'll happen. I wish it happened all the time, but you just sort of have to be, I was there. Mm-hmm. And you know, much smaller things happen that are equally important, but that happened to be a kind of a big thing.
I like that. I think, like you said, you were there, and also just the connection, you stood out. And in that, I think I would just want to say thank you so much for the connections that you've made, again, over the 25 years. Again, someone who, I know I'm not as old as I look, but I was a part of 21st Century programs many years ago, as well as now being able to oversee multiple 21st Century programs throughout the state of Los Angeles. And so again, thank you so much for the connections that you've made and also the contributions into the space for us. So in that, before we close out, I do want to open the space for any questions, maybe 2 or 3 for the audience who may have any questions for us. And a hush fell over the crowd. Go ahead.
I'll ask, and you might answer it, I apologize if you did, but you said 3 levels of connection, and I heard the starting point connection with students, then I heard the second point content has to connect, and then I never got the third one.
Okay, and one was sort of the site level, at the site leaders making connections to enhance the
community and
yeah, and then the third one is broader political with a small p. It could be big P, but you got to watch that in this day and age. But small p, you know, connecting with school board members, assistant superintendents, city council, legislators, and members of Congress or their staff. And that one is the one people, our people, just hate doing that. Yeah. And sometimes you're not very welcomed. And you don't want to be too pushy, but you don't want to be too light.
Right.
I grew up in a family, not anywhere in this space, all in family for 5 road construction. Road constructions, interstate highways, airports, they all rely on government funding from some form, just like most after school, some not, some fees. If I'm with any of my relatives in an airport, a restaurant, if a state legislator walks in, if a member of Congress walks in, within 5 minutes, hey, my older brother's named Jim Peterson. Hey, I'm Jim Peterson. You remember that interstate highway that's built, you know, like might be 50 miles from where the person lives? We did that.
Wow.
And the person says, oh, that's nice. They have no clue. But, you know, they'll pick up on that and something, and he won't push them. He'll just say, you know, that's, so it's almost easier in our space to do that, but it's harder from our persona. I think most people in this field think, gosh, we're doing such important work, I don't have to do more. Theoretically, you don't have to do more, but if you want to keep your program funded and growing, you've got to do more. You've got to reach out. You've got to make those connections.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for your question. Yeah.
Terry, you've talked a lot about kind of the history and how you've seen things kind of emerge. If you had a crystal ball, what's something that you would like to see in the future?
Where do you think it's going to go? Yeah. Well, we're going to be, so is everyone from California, who's not from California in the room? You're not, okay. Well, California is very unusual that you have a technical term, a boatload of after school and summer money. Not enough, but it's a boatload compared to any other state. So you aren't going to be affected as much. There's going to be some, I think, major changes to the federal 21st Century Community Learning Centers. In much of the country, that is the main source of after-school summer funding for struggling kids in struggling communities. It's going to either be, I don't think it's going to be eliminated by the new president and Congress, but I think it's going to be either cut back or consolidated, and the money turned over to the states to decide. They'll lump together like Title I, 21st Century, a bunch of little programs, and say, you know, you're so smart at the state level, you make the decisions. You know, so maybe California will use some money to supplement what you're doing, but other states will say, hey, you know, I got this great football field I want to build, and they'll put money in that. So it's going to take a lot of work. So that's the short term. The long term is kind of I see kind of two things happening now that have a big economic impact that affects employers and business, and I think that's when you're going to get more new interest, and that is a lot of, not enough, but a significant number of jobs. They aren't fabulous jobs, but they aren't terrible jobs, are being unfilled. And we're going to need more people who have like high school diploma and 1 or 2 years of community college or technical training to fill those jobs. But they don't pay, they're not terrible pay, but they're not great pay.
Right.
They can't afford childcare. And then the parent, mainly women, if they don't work 30 hours, they can't get benefits. So it's a double whammy if you have to pick your child up at 3 or in the summer. So I think now it's mainly the parents, mainly women, who see this, and grandparents, but they don't know quite what to do. So that's going to grow, I think. And then the second area I think is going to happen, I might be wrong, is that a growing number of young people and families can't afford to send their kids to four-year college. And a lot of this growing number of jobs, again, not fabulous, but not bad, you need a high school diploma and 1 or 2 years of post-secondary skill training, career training. I think after-school summer programs for middle and high school kids would behoove themselves if they look to have some kind of pathway program.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know how many schools in your area have dual enrollment for kids in high school can take community college courses for credit. I don't know of hardly anyone doing that after school or summers.
I will say with the organization I work with, a little background, is Woodcraft Rangers, if you all are familiar. Been around for 100 years. They've partnered with a program called TRLA with ELAC, and in that they are, it's a 3-year cohort where we are bringing staff on to work between our junior ranger program through 3rd grade program, and in that they're also being able to go to college to become credentialed teachers and get those teacher permits. So in that, it's starting to develop that pipeline, and so this is the first year that they've started that, and so I'm very interested because it's something that we've spoken about.
Yeah, because one shortage area is staff for after-school and summer programs, schools. But you sort of have the raw material already sitting in the after-school and summer program, middle and high school kids who could be junior teachers, teachers' aides, but probably need some experience and training. So, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole set of, I was in a rural area the other day, or I'm visiting a rural area, really surprising. Huge numbers of people who drive trucks, front end loaders, dozers. In many places they make 40, 50, 60, 70 grand. Huge numbers of them are 50 to 60 retiring. And this interesting before and after school program in a rural community created an apprentice program using before school, in school, and some site-based experience with the employer. So kids are coming out with a high school diploma and the first level of being an apprentice for a heavy equipment operator.
Nice. Wow.
But you also could think of that, for healthcare workers, teachers, and they're reaching young people who, absolutely have zero interest in college of any sort.
Right.
And there's a lot of those young people out around. So I'm saying that the two demands around workforce and business might be, I'm hoping, might be the new driver for more interest in this area. But we, in our field, have to think of after-school and summer offerings for middle and high school students different than perhaps what we're doing.
Yeah, as we're wrapping up, I'm thinking about my last summer with ECM, what we did with the high school program in Orangeburg, where we had the high school students, again with ECM, their art integration, but also merged with entrepreneurship. And within that, the high school students got to participate in an entrepreneurial program where they were able to develop their own small businesses. And just thinking about the work that we do in expanded learning, when we're able to really instill that spark within students, for them to see beyond just in the moment, again, that's how we are able to create those long-lasting, moments for students, but also just creating that workforce for them to continue to see themselves beyond just, again, maybe what they're getting within the school day. So, yeah.
Could I mention one other thing? You mentioned art. So I'm trained totally. I'm a chemistry teacher, a statistics professor. But in the last 25 years, I've seen there's a hunk of kids, I don't know if it's a quarter, a third, they get their inspiration and kicks out of art, music, and dance. And that in the after school and summer space, we sometimes add on, like we'll do art and music in the afternoon, which that's good than nothing. But there are models now where artists, musicians, dancers co-teach with teachers, content after school and summers, because of the flexibility, the attendance goes out of the roof and the learning goes out of the roof. So think of, in the end, maybe an area of underemployment in America are artists, all those art forms, art, music, dance, theater majors have, visual artists, they're probably all working part-time. And what they find is a huge pool of people who can help be involved in after school and summer, including retirees. So if you don't have a heavy dose of art, music, dance, somehow infused in your program, that would be another connection, kind of a specialty connection.
Right, because we know music brings us all together in all those ways. So, any more questions before we wrap up?
The question is for both of you. In my new role here as a coordinator in my district, and I get to serve as administrator during intersession. Previously to this position, I had 24 years in the classroom, so I was very student-centered. So how have you or what advice would you give in terms of dealing with the mindset of adult-centered and shifting it over to student-centered?
I love your description. You are a gold mine. Yeah, you hire him because you need somebody who comes out of the classroom like that, and some of you probably have or know people because they know about what I'm describing, that we have a 100-year tradition of what a school should look like. And there's some innovative schools, but I visit literally 1,000 schools, and most of them aren't very innovative because they're forced to be content. The teacher is the distributor of the knowledge, and they have to cover so much, and the tests have to. Is that where you're getting at? Yeah. So it's hard to bust out of that, except all of them have some kids who are not doing well. And if you, I have a merged family, 5 adult kids and 6 grandkids, and among that bunch, we have 2 grandsons who are really struggle with reading. And the solution when they were in the 5th grade or 3rd grade was more reading. So trouble is they both had dyslexia and more reading the same. One of them just got totally depressed. Finally, my daughter, who's not in education, even she's been to 1,000 of my lectures growing up. I had very little impact. She's into engineering. She went to the conference with the teachers and the principal and said, you got to start with what they're interested in, and then do that, and then weave in some reading and math. In this case, he needed some in-school tutoring, but when he heard that after school, and this is very unusual, his IEP after school is he has to have art, music, and dance. Has to have art, music, and dance because that's what excites him. He gets tutoring during the day. He's literally a different child. I mean, I was really concerned, like a 3rd grader depressed. So I don't know how, but I think maybe helping share with teachers and also building on their interests. There's a real divorce often between teachers have all kinds of things they do outside the classroom, but we don't try to invite that in a traditional school day in the day. Some of them do that, but they can use that after school and summers and help maybe the principal and superintendent see that, yeah, we're getting a bunch of kids we are not going to reach by just giving them more of the same. I may be wrong, but that would be my advice, and thank you for doing the work you're doing, because I think you can be a translator. Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
Except that you're just not speaking the same language.
I was gonna say, I think for me, first off, thank you for transitioning to the other side, to the dark side is what I call it. But just like Terry shared, I think being a communicator on behalf of what's taking place, there's a somewhat disconnect from the educators in the classroom to the after school. We've all heard, oh, those are your kids. And it's like, hold on, wait, no, these are our kids. Like, these are the same kids you just had. Or even more or less like, oh, there's someone different after school. And I think being able to articulate like, hey, this person is different because of the environment. I think this person is able to be different because this is a safe haven for this individual. I got the opportunity to work with teachers one summer where I actually told all the teachers, like, I don't want this to look like the traditional classroom. So if you're traditionally just standing up there teaching, sit on the floor, sit at a desk, do something different. And it got to the point where I was just like, I don't like what I'm seeing as far as like the lack of engagement. So like pulling teachers aside and saying like, how do you feel about pulling your classroom outside the classroom? And also, if you were to get that opportunity, what would that look like for you? And so being able to kind of have like that vision session and almost like reimagine what lessons could look like, because teachers are so used to, again, very strategic, this needs to be this way, this needs to be this way. If you're able to, again, bring that element of surprise to a kid, they're gonna be like, oh, wait, oh, this is gonna be exciting, let me focus. And so one thing I've just really shared, again, like for someone transitioning from the classroom, I got the opportunity to be in the classroom as well. Think about like the good things that you're able to do in the classroom, and think about the good things you can do after school. For example, you can learn in the classroom, but you can play music, you can have popcorn, you can have snack, you can bring the homework into a game. See how you can also be able to tell that story for your teachers to say, hey, there's a different level of engagement after school where it's a experiential learning. And I think like that's sometimes the disconnect, because it's like, oh, it's so loud, it's too much fun going on. Or, they're not doing anything. And it's like, well, actually, they're drawing a story, they're building out, I always said if we're able to trick the mind to learn, again, working with students, if you do an open discussion and your open discussion question is, start a story with X, Y, and Z, and then you're able to have that, talk to that student and have that dialogue to build, it's like you just created an artist right there. That's a writer. And if we stop looking at students as just students, and like you said earlier, going to that human-centered approach. Yeah. It's the same with adults. I say like I always want to make sure I'm serving students in excellence. I want to make sure I'm serving the adults that's taking care of the little people in excellence too. And so being able to kind of have those conversations to reignite the joy, because also I know for those who've been in a classroom, sometimes our passion can make us a little bitter. It can make us a little, the joy is almost gone. And one thing, again, and I appreciate y'all being in this space, I want to remind people of the joy of the work that they do, because there's times where it gets so difficult and you're like, to be very honest, the heck with this. But also, I always tell the teams that I lead, remember why you started. Exactly, keep that as the center, because again, I always say there's my little self that I always have to look in the mirror and say, you were a part of after school. Who is the adult you needed back then, and how can you be that adult now? And same with teachers. Think about when you went to go get your teaching credentials. You wanted to be the top-notch teacher. You wanted to be high energy, super engaging. I want my classroom to stand out. It's the same thing with our after-school programs. I don't know about you all. I always want my programs to stand out, because again, that's how I keep ADA up. That's how I keep my students engaged. But also, that's how I keep the safe haven for my students to know that they have a place to go to do all of these things. So that would be my note to you.
Yeah. Now, the one metric I saw, there's a really huge set of after-school programs in Dallas. It has a lot of arts focus and sports, but they kind of use the metric of engagement. Mm-hmm. And they actually hire retired teachers and artists to go in and observe the summer and after-school program and look at engagement. And that is a really interesting metric, because after school and summers are voluntary. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the relationship on the front end and engagement next, You can spot that. I walk into schools, after-school programs, after all my visits, and with 5 minutes, I can tell if it's working or not, because if you watch the engagement, particularly kids on the back row. Yeah. One other part of engagement for teachers, I've seen when you ask teachers, like, and we rarely do this, what would you like, if you had your druthers of what you like to do, and how could you use it in after school? I saw just 2 little examples. I know we're going on too long. This one was in Sacramento a few years ago. A rare male kindergarten teacher was teaching in the after-school program for elementary kids, high, low income, tennis and golf. And they had the least equipment you could possibly have, and these kids were all over it. Right next to it was, talking about connection, real fancy golf course, tennis club, and they heard about this, so they started providing equipment. But the teacher was so excited about, after that experience, teaching in his kindergarten class, because the kids saw him in a different light, and the kids were excited. One other example, northern Wisconsin, hundreds of thousands of Hmong refugees went to northern Wisconsin and Minnesota after the Vietnam War, and many of them still have really not broken out of their community. And a lot of the Hmong kids in high school, and their families that have been there now like 20 years, wouldn't participate in any extracurricular activities. So somehow the after-school program, 21st century teachers said, we got to do something different. So we're going to call it, we're going to stress the word after school, the school. And we're going to go on an overnight skiing trip. And, they really had to work with the parents and explain, they're going to learn about all these things. And the teachers came back and said, I think I got far more out of it than the kids, even though the kids were totally out, because they said they saw me in a different light. They treat me a whole lot better, even though I've been treated well before, but they're more engaged in the classroom. So I think helping, if you can find also avenues to get a few of the teachers who might be interested in this involved in what you're doing, they'll bring a lot of other people around. And some teachers and some principals just won't buy it. But that's, my friend who used to run the program in Dallas said, that's when you use kiss and release. Thank you for your interest, but we're going to move on, and you don't have to be involved. We love you, but we're not going to involve you.
That's the bless and release method we all know. So anyway, I want to say again, thank you so much. Our time has come to an end. I want to also send my appreciations to all of you. I don't know if you've ever tuned in, but every Thursday, Evenings of Empowerment takes place on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Music, as well as YouTube, or any platform where you type in Enrich by Richmond or Evenings of Empowerment. You're welcome to visit my website, www.enrichedbyrichmond.com, and send me an email, connect, or find me on LinkedIn, Richmond Brown, comma Jr. So again, thank y'all so much, and I hope y'all enjoy the Boost Conference.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you so much.